Millennials have the good fortune of being the unluckiest generation in history financially. First, you have Social Security because millennials are paying into Social Security every time you get paid, not to pay for your own retirement, but to pay for somebody else to retire. And then you have the cost of living versus wage discrepancy, which if you look back over the last 5 decades, the last 50 years, you'll see that wages have been growing, but they haven't been growing fast enough to keep up with the growing cost of living, which means effectively people are becoming poorer when you go and graduate school. And now to top it all off, you have college, because millennials are the first generation to realize the dropping value of a college degree, but millennials will also be left with the price tag of student loan forgiveness, aka paying off other people's degrees, because when the government pays for something like student loans, well, the cost is not paid for by the government, it's paid for by people because the government generates this money from people. So you go to work, you get paid, and then you pay taxes. And this cost that's paid for by the government is paid for by people either through taxes or inflation. Now, before I go any deeper, let me just say this, that while all these things might not seem like good things, it also creates some of the biggest opportunity for young people and millennials if you understand money and if you understand what's going on, but I'll get to that in just a little bit. Let me start by talking about Social Security, because traditionally, retirement was what's known as a three-legged stool. You could rely on the government through Social Security, you would rely on your employer through a pension, and then you would have your own investments, the third stool, which would be something like a 401k or an IRA today. Well, Social Security has been drying up. This is something that is pretty well known, where the Social Security Administration has been spending way more money than they're bringing in because people are living longer, and so they have higher costs, and so they don't have enough money to keep paying for people to retire while more people are retiring at the same time. This is where there's a lot of confusion as to what's going to happen, because everybody says, oh, the government can just fund more money into Social Security. And sure, if Social Security dries up, that's probably what will happen, but where's the government going to get this money? Remember, the government gets their money from people either through taxes or inflation. So either they're going to charge you more money on your income today through Social Security taxes so that we can keep funding the Social Security checks, or they're just going to print the money and send you bigger Social Security checks. But that also means that you're going to have to be paying higher inflation. So now, yeah, you got a bigger Social Security check, but a loaf of bread is $20. The second aspect to retirement was pensions, which we all know are pretty much history nowadays. No one really gets a pension today. And the third aspect was your own retirement fund. This is something like a 401k or an IRA. And so today, millennials and young people are looking at retirement really with just a one-legged stool. It's your own retirement. However, the founder of the 401k has also come out and said that the 401k has gone awry because so many people are looking at 401ks as their sole retirement plan, and it was never intended to be your sole retirement plan. So if you are investing your money for retirement and you have a 401k, fine, that's an okay place to start, but that should not be where your retirement planning ends. You need to have your own investments outside of the 401k, and I'll get to more on what you should be doing in just a little bit, but just understand that your 401k is not enough. You need to be investing your money yourself as well. The second issue has to do with the cost of living, because now if we look back about 50 years ago to our parents or our grandparents' generation back then, if you had one stream of income, so one person in the household that either has a college degree or even a high school degree, you could support a family of 4, you could buy a home, you could buy a car, and you could live comfortably. Today, not only do you need 2 streams of income, but people are still struggling to survive. Why? Because the cost of living has been growing significantly faster than wages, so people are effectively becoming poorer because the amount of money you're making now after your college degree isn't enough to support your income, and on top of that, you have to borrow money to get the education in the first place. I'll talk about the college degrees in just a second, but this is where the cost of living has been growing so much faster than wages. Why is that happening? Because of inflation. The government and the Federal Reserve Bank have been spending and printing so much money over the last number of decades. Every time you print more money without producing more wealth, aka every time the Federal Reserve Bank just prints money so the government has more money to spend, because now when you're spending on a deficit, you're spending money that you don't have. That means the government is generating dollars through taxes, but then they spend even more money than what their taxes bring in. So the government spends more money than what they have, the Federal Reserve Bank prints this money, and this dilutes the value of our currency, making the price of things go up. And so now you have to pay more money for your housing, you have to pay more money to buy groceries, you have to pay more money to get a car, you have to pay more money for everything, while your wages can't keep up. This brings us to what's been happening with college degrees. Now, we did a whole deep dive on this in Market Briefs, which is my free financial newsletter. So if you haven't joined Market Briefs yet, you should do that. That way you can stay up to date on what's happening in the top finance and business news, and that way you can stay educated on what's happening in the markets, especially if you are an investor. So if you want to join Market Briefs, it's completely free to do that. It's a free newsletter where my team is breaking down what's happening in the stock market, real estate market, crypto, inflation, and the global economy into a fun, easy to read, and witty newsletter that you can read in less than 5 minutes every morning. If you want to join Market Briefs, it's free. I'll put the link to how you can do it down in the description below. Millennials are the most educated generation in history, and millennials believe that they're also the most hard-hit generation in history when it comes to finances. What's going on here? Well, nowadays, everybody has a college degree. Why is that? Because a number of years ago, the government passed a bill which said that anybody who wants a student loan can get one. So the government guaranteed student loans to people. Now, this sounds good because now anybody who wants to get educated can get educated. The problem is colleges heard this, and then they said, okay, how about we start raising our tuition prices because we're going to get paid no matter what. So it was like music to colleges and universities' ears because now they can get paid no matter what. They can charge any price that they want, and they know that they're going to get paid because students will be able to borrow the money from the government. The government will guarantee the loans. And you can't even bankrupt your way out of a student loan the way you can a car loan or a credit card loan or a mortgage. You can't do that with a student loan because now it's money to the government, and so you're on the hook forever. And so colleges didn't really care. They started raising the prices of their tuitions, which naturally created this massive student loan bubble. Well, now we have this massive student loan bubble where now everybody's getting educated because we're all told that the way you become successful is by going to school, getting a good degree, and getting a good job. And so everybody's getting a degree. And now what people are realizing is a degree doesn't really give you that much value. We are seeing the value of a college degree drop now. Millennials are facing the price of that. Why? Because everybody has a college degree. When you go and apply for a job and you have a college degree, it doesn't make you stick out. It makes you just like everybody else. Nowadays, I can tell you from experience because I have hired many people. I have many people that work for the Minority Mindset team. I don't really care if you go to college or not. I don't care which college you went to. What I want to see is your experience, how good you are, how passionate you are, and your willingness to learn. So employers are now looking for experiences more than degrees. And now we're in a situation where you have millions of Americans that are struggling financially, partially due to their student loans, because now they have this huge multi-$1,000, multi-$100,000 student loan payment, student loan balance that they have to pay off because their job isn't providing enough to pay for their student loans. How did they get into this predicament? Because everybody says that the way you become successful is by going to school, get as much education as you can, forget about the cost, don't worry about the cost, and then get a job. Don't worry about the income. Well, then when you get your job, you have to start caring about your income because now you have to pay for your rent, you have to pay for your groceries, you have to pay for your car, and then you have to pay for your student loans. And if your income isn't enough, now you're struggling. This is where now the government is trying to fix the problem by paying off some people's student loans. Now, the risk here is what happens if colleges hear this and say, oh, are people going to get their student loans forgiven? Maybe we should keep raising our prices even more because there's no restrictions on universities on how much money they can charge. There's no rules on the student loans on how much money people can borrow. You can keep borrowing as much money as you want. Colleges can raise their prices as much as they want. But now they're saying, well, if we just raise our tuition so much that we create an even bigger bubble, maybe then the government will be forced to pay it off. And people might say, who cares how much money I borrow? The government might just pay it off. So it starts to create this slippery slope, which can be very dangerous financially because remember, the government doesn't have any money. The government gets their money from you, me, Americans, taxpayers. You go to work, you get paid, you pay taxes. And if the government can't generate enough money from taxes, how are they going to pay for it? Through inflation. They're going to print that money and then they're going to spend it to do things like paying off student loans. This is where you have to understand how the system works because at the end of the day, even when the government pays for it, it's still you that's paying for it. And this is a cost that you have to understand, which brings me now to the solution. How do you get out of this system where these things don't matter? It doesn't matter if the government is paying off student loans. It doesn't matter if the government is paying off somebody else's student loans. And it doesn't matter if the government is not paying off student loans. It doesn't matter what's going on with the cost of living. It doesn't matter what's going on with Social Security. It doesn't matter what's going on with all these different things. How can you enter a world where none of these things matter? Because the reality is, well, all these things suck. If you don't think like the majority of people, if you break out of what the majority of people are doing, none of these things matter. And now you can work on building yourself, and now the amount of opportunity and wealth potential is so significantly more, where none of these little things like gas prices going up or the government paying off student loans or getting a rent increase notice, none of these things affect you. And the first thing is you want to stop relying on another entity like the government to take care of you. Because if you're relying on the government to take care of you, whether it's in the form of retirement, whether it's in the form of getting you money, whether it's in the form of paying off your student loans, when you're reliant on the government, you then become a slave to the government. You don't want to do that. This is where you want to stop relying on the government and start relying on yourself to take care of yourself. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to go out and start your own business. This means that now you want to become self-reliant in the sense that when you get paid, you want to use your money in a way to build your own wealth. Now, how do you do that? Well, you're getting paid and you have expenses, right? You got to pay for your house, you got to pay for your car, you got to pay for your groceries, you got to pay for everything else. But you want to make sure you have a buffer. You want to make sure you're not spending all of your income. You have to do this. So you want to save this cash, but then you don't want to just save all of it and just leave it in a bank account. You want to do two different things. You want to save some money for emergencies, somewhere between 3 months to a year's worth of expenses. That way, in case something bad happens, you're protected. But on the other hand, you also want to be investing your money. Because now when inflation happens, what do you see? You see a bigger divide between the wealthy and the poor. Why does that happen? It's not just because the wealthy are getting a 10 times bigger salary or a 100 times bigger salary. It's because the wealthy people own the assets, and the value of the assets are growing. Well, most poor people, most financially uneducated people don't own any assets. And so now when you are investing your money, you become a part of the investor class. You don't have to go out and start a business. You can just invest in a business and now you become an owner of a business. You can invest in real estate investments. You can invest in startups. And the nice thing is you don't need a ton of money to do this. You can start with $1,000. If you don't have $1,000, you can start with $100. If you don't have $100, there are apps out there that let you start with at least $1. And you might say, Jaspreet, what is $1 going to do? And you're right, $1 invested is not going to make you a millionaire, but it's a start. You start with $1 today, add another $1 tomorrow, add another $1 the day after that. Maybe then you can start doing $5 a day. Maybe then you can start doing $10 a day. Small incremental increases in your investments coupled with a lot of time, coupled with steady, consistent growth can make you very, very, very wealthy. If you start investing $4 a day and you never increase how much money you invest, no matter how much money you make, you just keep investing these $4 a day, and you do this until you retire, until you're 66 years old, and you can just invest your money in the market and get an average return, something around 10% a year, you will retire a millionaire based off your $4 a day investment. Now, if you can invest $10 a day, $20 a day, now the amount of money and wealth you will build will multiply. It won't be 1 million, it could be 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million, but it all starts with that $1, $10, $100, $1,000, because now you understand the way the system works, because the system is designed to benefit not the wealthy, but the investor class, the business owner class, the owner class. And so how do you do that? Well, you have to start doing that, because people assume that wealthy people are the only ones that can do this. Yeah, wealthy people are doing it. Wealthy people are the investor class, but you don't need $1 million to start. You just need the right mindset. You need a couple of dollars, and then you got to start doing it, because that is the way that you become wealthy. Most millionaires don't become millionaires by starting this huge company. Yes, you can become a millionaire by doing that, but most millionaires become millionaires by slow, steady, consistent investments. And as you're doing this, as you're building your wealth, then you start to see that all these things that are happening in the world that sound like they suck, yeah, they might suck, but now you're protecting yourself, you're building a shield, and you're able to capitalize on everything that's happening in the economy, whether it's good, whether it's bad. You're able to come out of this a financial winner no matter what's happening, and that's what you need to do if you want to be able to take care of yourself, your family, and your community. And this first starts by building that self-reliance. Stop asking for more help from other people. Start taking care of yourself first. Inflation needs to come down, right? I think we can all agree to that. The Federal Reserve Bank says that they want inflation to come down. They want inflation to come down to 2%. Well, how do you do that? You need the price of things to stop going up or go down. And so one of the things that they say is they want to cool the housing market.